Hi there. Do you work a lot with TimeSeries data? Or you really love using InfluxDB to store and query that TimeSeries data? Well, did you also know that you can run InfluxDB on AWS? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how. My name is Derek Bingham, a developer advocate at AWS, and I'm going to show you how to create an InfluxDB instance using Timestream for InfluxDB, all on AWS. The instance will be managed and you don't have to do any heavy lifting and looking after the servers. So let's just dive in and see how easy and quickly you can do it. So here we have the AWS console. We have to go into Amazon Timestream to get started. So let's search for Amazon Timestream. There it is there, so I just click on it and open up the Amazon Timestream service. So you'll see I can do Timestream for live analytics and Timestream for InfluxDB. This time we're going to create a Timestream for InfluxDB. Once we click in here, we need to supply a few things like the DB instance name. So I'm going to call this Derek Demo Influx. And then we give it a username, an organization name, and an initial bucket name. So if you have used InfluxDB in the past, all of these should be familiar, but if you haven't, you need the username to log into the instance, and you always need a default organization and bucket. We also need to supply a password with the username so we can log in. So here's my super secret password. And next we start to configure the instance. So we configure things like the size of machine that it runs on, that are all optimized for Influx workloads from 16x large with 64 CPUs all the way down to 1 CPU, which I'll choose for this demo. You can also change the storage type up to 16,000 IOPS all the way down to 3,000, which I'll run, and also the storage from 20 gig to a lot more than 20 gig. You can choose either it's a multi-AZ deployment for redundancy and what you'd use really in production, to a single AZ, which I'll use now because this is a demo. You can also change the VPC, so where and what VPC this is running and across what subnets. So with subnets and security groups, you can really lock down the access to this instance. And also you can define if it has a public IP. For this demo, I'm going to set it up to have a public IP. You can also define parameter groups, which you can pass to the instance, and a log location, which is in an S3 bucket. Now, there are a few things about the S3 bucket that you need to know, so I'm just going to quickly jump into the S3 service and show you what those things are. So if I open up and link a new tab and switch to that tab, this is the S3 service. So the first thing we need to do, create bucket. The first thing we need to check is the AWS region. The AWS region for the S3 bucket must be in the same region as your InfluxDB instance. Next, you give it a bucket name, Derek Demo InfluxDB. And for the rest of the settings, you can keep those as default. Hit create. And the bucket will be created. Now, once the bucket is created, another thing that you have to do is add an access policy. So that's under permissions from S3. Scroll down to bucket policy and click add. In this screen, I have created a policy already, so I'll paste that in and I'll take you through what it is. So in this policy, you are allowing a particular service principal, and that principal is timestream-influxdb.amazonaws.com. So this is the service principal for Timestream for InfluxDB. And also, you allow access to the resource, which is this particular bucket, so you specify that as well. So that is the permissions sorted out. And now, when we go back to Timestream for InfluxDB, that S3 bucket will appear and we can select it as a log location. Okay, so that's it. So now we create Influx database. So this will go away and create the Influx database. The database will appear on your list and it will have a status of creating. You can click into it and see more details of the database and to check on the status. Now you'll know that the status is finished creating when you see an endpoint. So the endpoint is how you access the InfluxDB UI. If you're running private, you'll have to SSH through another box that's inside the private VPC. But because we've made this public, we can access the InfluxDB UI. So wait for the UI to initialize, and once it is, you can log in with the credentials that I created earlier. And if you've again used InfluxDB in the past, this UI should be very familiar. So with the InfluxDB UI, there's some really handy wizards to get you started. One is to set up the CLI. Now I've already set up the CLI, and I'm just going to jump over to it now. This CLI I've set up has already got authentication token set up, so it can access the InfluxDB instance that I have. So let's just test that. So you can see the influx.org list output gives me that my Derek.org is accessible. So next I want to just make sure that my bucket is inside that org. So I do a bucket list for that org. And there at the bottom you'll see Derek Influx bucket is there and available. So the next steps that I want to do is I want to send TimeSeries data into that bucket. So I do this again with the Influx CLI. Now I don't have to use the CLI. I can use the various APIs and open source libraries that you can traditionally use to send TimeSeries data up into InfluxDB. They will all work with Amazon Timestream for InfluxDB. But this particular example I took straight from the InfluxDB website. And it's sending a bunch of TimeSeries data, up into the bucket that I've specified. Once it's there, I can then jump back into the InfluxDB UI and start to see what it's going to look like. So I do this in Data Explorer. So let's jump into Data Explorer. And you'll see here, they have two panes. You have a query editor, which will use Flux scripts to edit a query, and then you'll have the actual graph area at the top. So the first thing we want to do is jump into the script editor. So if you're familiar with InfluxDB and used it before, you'll be familiar with these Flux scripts. And these are ways of querying the TimeSeries data that you've ingested into InfluxDB. So I'm going to specifically look at data that's inside my bucket. So Derek InfluxDB is what the from bucket is going to address. And inside that bucket, I'm interested in a particular time or time frame. Then I need to use the range keyword, so I'll put in range. Notice that there's auto completion here as well to help you get your Flux scripts right. And with the range keyword or function, I need to specify two time zones, two timestamps, beg your pardon, two timestamps. And the timestamps are all written in Zulu. There'll be a start time and there will also be a stop time. So inside this time window, I'm interested in all the TimeSeries data. And so I specify that with a start and stop timestamp. So once I've written my Flux query, I can then execute that query. And you'll see it up here. So here you see all my data that's been returned inside that time window that I've specified. Now, maybe this is not the best way to visualize things. So with the Data Explorer, you can also change the graph that's used. So from the drop down up here, I can change it to maybe a graph and single stat, which is not that useful, or maybe I can change it to something like a histogram, which is. So that's it. I've set up InfluxDB using Amazon Timestream for InfluxDB, you can see that I was able to ingest TimeSeries data into that instance and start querying it with the Data Explorer. If you want to know more about Amazon Timestream for InfluxDB, I've included some links in the comment below. I hope you enjoyed this short video, and I hope you have fun experimenting with Amazon Timestream for InfluxDB. Thanks for watching. Bye.